formal training. And we then heard also several talks about how the attendance of these training courses really benefited from going to this formal training, which I'm also attending right now. But now we really want to see also how this training is really transferred into the daily life of the research infrastructures. And also, if you read the title, Training the Future Infrastructure Leaders from Prep Phase to Sustainability. So that means there's a long phase. Different situations might occur from the beginning to the end, from very new infrastructures to very really established ones, bigger organizations. So I'm really now interested to hear from my colleagues here how this is done in their actually organizations. So we now have a total of 4 speakers here. 2 of them are really from more established ones, I would say, and 2 are from very new ones. And the challenges might be different. So the first speaker is Niklas Blomberg. He's the director of Elixir in Cambridge. Again, a very established infrastructure in the field of bioinformatics. So I'm very happy to have him here and tell us more about his experiences.
So thanks a lot. So I think this is meant as a sort of short impromptu update. So I wanted to give just a brief flavor of Elixir for those of you who are not in the field of life science, but then just focus on a couple of things that I think has been really important in building up the infrastructure. And I think that there is a message here about the skills that I think are really necessary, and actually the number of people that you need to help to acquire those skills. It's not 1 or 2 people at the head office. It's actually quite a lot of people in a distributed infrastructure. So Elixir is infrastructure for life science data. We have 22 members across Europe. And we are really built around, so we are a distributed infrastructure, and we're built around the concept of national nodes, where each of these nodes bring together a number of bioinformatics centers in the country. And then we are focusing on connecting these nodes and making sure that the technology is compatible, that the tools and the standards are being widespread or in widespread use. And so that we sort of put the foundation in place for a federated data ecosystem in the life sciences. And the skills part of that is really quite important. So a lot of what we do is really about people development and capacity building, because as we are developing new technology, it's a lot of people who need to acquire that technology. And I just want to show, so we often illustrate ourselves like this with a sort of network diagram. Looks very simple, with the sort of a simple line going between every country. When in reality, this is what it looks like. So these are the number of connections between national centers in all our technical projects to date. And as you can see, it's really quite an intense connectivity that you need to foster. And it's a lot of people that you need to bring together for this actually to work. And so if we look at the leadership and management of distributed research infrastructures, so Elixir is about 6 years old, so we are one of the first infrastructures on the S3 sort of roadmap, and one of the first established distributed infrastructures. And I think there is quite a lot of dimensions to this. It's about managing upwards, the rocky seas of managing your boards, as Ilaria put it, but it's also about working with your national centers, your team at the hub, the community of users, and of course the community of service providers. And you need to manage in all of these different dimensions. And so again, it's easy to have this sort of very simplified network diagram. In reality, this is what it looks like, of course. This is from our all hands meeting, but a large distributed research infrastructure brings together an awful lot of people, and you need to get all of these people to move in the same direction. And so it's about providing the direction and then making sure that all of them know where we're going, and then of course to train and enable people to go where we want to go, because it's no good knowing the direction unless you really enable people to move a long way you want them to go. And so I really think that distributed infrastructures, and maybe that's a big contrast to the more sort of single-site infrastructures, is that the biggest asset is really the people. And so I think Elixir really is built on this collaborative European community, because you need to bring together researchers and infrastructure experts from across Europe and make sure that they do attack common problems and deliver services jointly. And I mean, this is what the work looks like in the infrastructure, right? And I think it's the same for most of you. You bring together people in various rooms, in various locations, to really understand and work on the problems first together, and then make sure that they bring the ideas home and work on them separately under a long time. And so what are our tools? And I think this leads into the training. So we have our technical projects, the connectivity diagram, and which is funded through our internal budget, and Anna kindly showed our our process, how we're trying to sort of plan that into a budget cycle. But really it's about connecting, in this case, Norway and the United Kingdom in specific projects around specific problems, and make sure that those technologies then match. And then as this develops, you bring in more countries into each of the technical projects. So there is a need for, as we talked about, service management, technical project management, and sort of general project management skills that you need to make sure is widespread in the organization. And perhaps the biggest challenge there is to make sure that they understand the way we are going about setting up those projects within Elixir. And so one very successful way of doing that has been staff exchange, where we bring people to the hub and they stay a week at the hub and then they go home. Anna is one of these exchanger, and I think that's been really quite helpful to understand how we operate. And so that's a big training need and training gap. We do a lot of community meetings. So as we are here, a large part of the Elixir technical community are having a lot of fun outside Paris, because we have our European Hackathon Week that brings together all of them in a small farm outside Paris, and they sit on a week and jointly work on all these technical projects together. And so if you, I wouldn't suggest that there are better options, but if you get interested, you can look at Twitter from Biohackathon EU, and it's really quite entertaining, and you wish you were there. And then, as I said, staff exchange and these capacity building programs have been really important for us in building skills. And we have run the first, and we're now setting up a second staff exchange program for the EMRI modules, so that not only the head office, but also people from our nodes have been able to go to the EMRI master program. And I think, I mean, we have Anna here in the audience from Portugal, we have France, and we have Norway and other nodes that have been sort of the middle management that Paco talked about. And I think that's been really well received and really quite useful to make sure that we build skills, because we are distributed, so we need to have the skills not in the center, but actually in all of our centers. So, and the last point I want to make is that you need to reinforce this via consistent actions and communication. And so one of the ways we've done this in Elixir is, for instance, our imaging policy. So on our website, in all of our brochures and print material, we never use stock photos. We always use photos from our events with the participants from the community doing real things in the community. And so that's, again, a way of communicating and reinforcing this sense of ownership and joint ownership of the distributed infrastructure. So I'll stop there. And I think this is, again, it's distributed infrastructures are not built by a center, they are built by the periphery. And you really need to make sure that you develop not only the center, but develop the periphery. And I think the training part of that is really quite important, because that's the way you build similarity in procedures and understanding of how to operate in this complex network. You can only achieve that by sort of training and skills development. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Niklas. So this is meant as a real interactive session. We have about 10-15 minutes for each speaker. So I think what we can do now is just ask questions to Niklas right away. And then at the end, we'll see how things go. At the end, we might have still time to ask everybody. Are there any particular questions for Niklas at this point? If not, then I would have at least one. Say, Alexi is now quite a. There's one question. Okay. You have the microphone.
I just wondered whether you could say a little bit more about how you orchestrated ensuring that the volume of people that you've managed to get to Emory worked. Did you need to get approval from board level? Was that something that you could just make a decision on yourself? I'm wondering if there's some wisdom that you could impart to heads of other research infrastructures here.
Can we turn off the live streaming for a second? so sometimes it's a lot easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Marcus has a question.
No, in all seriousness, I think you can do these things if you prepare the ground right. So you need to communicate consistently that training and development is important. And then that enables you to make part of the budget, set aside part of the budget to invest in skills, not only for the center. Investing both for the center and the nodes is very uncontroversial in distributed infrastructure, but actually investing in training may be more controversial. And I think it's about making that case consistently, and then you can do these things.
Markus Bastiak, University Milano Bicocca. Niklas, you mentioned how important training of your staff at different levels here is and what the challenges are. Now, do you have an idea how much resources Elixir is putting into training? Do you have some, doesn't necessarily need to be, cash figures, but, investment or resources? Or with other words, what would you think is a good percentage of your overall operating costs? We're not talking about construction now and designing, but of your operating costs, which should be put into training.
So that's a really difficult question. I think, so we invest relatively little in classroom learning. So, well, that said, our training coordinators have delivered, I think, about 2,000 days of training to 19,000 people over the last 5 years. But that is training for domain experts and the sort of scientific training.
So the users not necessarily.
Yeah. Well, yeah, users and or advanced facility operators. I think if we look at the more management side, we invest relatively little in that training, but a lot of it, I think, is on-the-job training. So, I'll pick on Anna again. When you visit the Elixir Hub for a week, is that training? Well, it's very useful because we get to understand how the Portuguese node operates. The Portuguese node get to understand our processes much better. But actually, as you sit there, you solve practical problems and you make sure you advance the technical projects in Portugal, and they take a leap during that week. 2 weeks later, someone from Norway comes to the hub and we do the same thing. Is that training or is it delivery? I think that's but it means that you need to budget for that sort of interactive part of your operation.
And the second one would be your recommendation, if you can say something.
No, I can't. I would need to think. But I think the on-the-job training part is really quite important, and you need to make sure that you build in timelines into your project so you can actually use the projects to develop people.
I think the reasoning behind the question is that we see a lot of business plans from either existing or future research infrastructures where there is zero line to training. And we want to also get the message out that you should already from the start think about how do you get your people's skills improved, or how do you develop the skills of the people, and that needs some money somewhere. And just putting zero for training is just not enough. That was the reasoning for the question. Thank you.
If I can just add a point, it's not only money, it's also the size of your team, because people that are currently under training are not delivering your normal activity. So you need to have kind of a spare capacity just to be able to send some people following some training. Because this is one of our challenges at EGI, for example. We have a very good training plan. The point is that, as Dominic said, we are working like a startup, and we always have the head under the water. And most of the time, people don't get the time to go and follow the training. So that's another issue that you have to put in your planning.
I think that's especially true for new infrastructures, which are just starting. So normally you have only a few people. Suddenly there's a lot of things to take care of. And then really to send someone to a proper training is difficult and challenging.
Just a little comment to this. It is exactly true, right? I mean, this is the kind of problem we find again and again, but this is an investment. This is an investment. We have to put this into our business plan. We have to say that our people have to be trained, and that will make the future services and deliveries better. So we have to make it one way or another. It's not enough that we are very busy to learn new things, because these new things will allow us to be less busy.
There's one more question.
Thank you. This is just to emphasize the dimension of this staff exchange. This is not formal training, it's capacity building. You are together, you understand how the system works, how can you contribute, how can you access and participate. And this is crucial to get body and to know the process, to learn the process. So you learn by doing, it's very important. Budget should also be associated to this.
I'm just wondering that if over the years in a now established infrastructure, do you think that the job profiles of some people might change, and then that you would need specific training for these people simply because you're getting bigger or more specialized, and how would you do that? Or is it again just training on the job, or you go and look for particular training courses?
Yeah, we do, so absolutely. I mean, the roles change almost continuously as an RI develop. I think that's true for almost all of us here. But so, I mean, of course we invest in training. If people are stepping up to managerial role, we send them on a management course. If we need to do process optimization, we've sent them to things like Lean Six Sigma process optimization courses to drive process optimization. We've done a lot of FITSM training with the team, actually with EGI, which has been really well appreciated. And so, yeah, I think we just, as the roles develop, we need to look at what are the skills and the capacity we need to bring into the team, and then we try to acquire that. And we don't ask for a lot of permission for a lot of people before we do it, we just do it.
Kath Brooksbank from the EBI. Maybe I could just add a comment to that that's directly related to RItrain. Everything that we developed in RItrain stemmed from a competency framework, which provides a set of competencies that research infrastructure managers and leaders need. And the intention behind that competency framework was for RIs to use it to identify their skills gaps and fill them. And they might fill some of those skills gaps through training that RItrain is offering, but it was also our intention to help people to find other training as well. So just to flag that that competency framework is still there and is there to be used.
Okay, I think if there are no more questions to Nicholas, I think we should move on to the next speaker, with Suzanne de Michel, the coordinator from Operas.
So I don't have slides because I've been told it will be quite short, and we don't need to have slides, so you will be obliged to listen to me. So I will try to be as clear as possible. So the name of what I want to tell you today is that OPRAS, the title of my presentation is OPRAS, a new way of coordinating people, or coordinating research infrastructure. I don't remember which one, but what is important is coordination. OPRAS stands for Open Scholarly Communication in the European research area for social science and humanities. So the role of OPRAS is to coordinate, actually, a fragmented community, which is exactly the specificity of social science and humanities researchers in the whole Europe. So what we try to do is to coordinate. And this is exactly why we decided not to deal with leadership or with managing or with director in our governance model, but to work with the new title, with this kind of title of coordinators. So within OPRAS, we have, in the governance model, we have an executive board, which is very classical, and which is constituted by the 9 national nodes of the infrastructure, and 2 coordinators. One who is more dealing with the members of OPRAS, and the other one, myself, who is more dealing with the external partnerships and things like that. So this way, we want to be as close as possible as what is called a distributed infrastructure, because when you have a distributed infrastructure, but directors all cited in the same place, it's not exactly the same as giving all the power to an executive board, which is made by the national nodes of the infrastructure. So, of course, decisions are made by our executive board, and the coordinators are only suggesting things, proposing new ideas, a letter of support, development, things like that, to the core group. But our role as coordinators is to coordinate the OPERAS coordination team. So actually the office support, the central hub, there are a lot of names to explain what is this kind of team, but you already know, so this is the administrative and operational team of OPERAS. And actually, this kind of organization implies 2 different things for both the OPERAS coordination team and the executive board. For the OPERAS coordination team, it implies to have a great autonomy because they are responsible of their task, and even if they work with the coordinators and they work under our control, it's really it's mainly more about advising or sharing ideas and opinion and views on the infrastructure, but not on how they can do their work. So the OPERAS coordination team is really in charge of specific things, which implies for them to be very autonomous. And the other point for the executive board is that we send plenty of email to our executive board, and they are supposed to be very reactive to each of our demand, suggestion, and so on. So this way of managing can be quite difficult. I think it's also the case because we are a young infrastructure. We are in the preparatory phase to be part of the future, preparing the application for the future S3 roadmap 2021. So it's quite different as the model presented by Elixir, but it's both because we are young, and I insist on this because we want to reflect as much as possible the specificity of the social science and humanities community. So for us, the major challenge as a preparatory phase infrastructure is how to build a team. It's really the team building challenge for us because we have so many things to do at financial level, legal, operational. So everything has to be done in the same time and in a very short time and without a lot of budget because it's only the beginning. So of course for us, it's really important to have a team which understands where we are and why we are relying so much on them, and also how to be sure that this team has time to develop other kind of relationships and not only not only for work or not only for specific demands or things like that. Because when you want to develop a research infrastructure, you also need to have, I don't want to say fun, but you also need to spend good time with those people, because even if you mainly because you don't see them every day, because you are placed in different location. So it's really important to be sure that you develop other kind of relation with them. And here, this is something which can be difficult when you have so many deadlines to manage every day, to continue to have a nice discussion with your team. Moreover, another major challenge for us in OPRAS is that both the OPRAS coordination team and the executive board of OPRAS need to understand at more or less the same level the kind of complex environment of a research infrastructure. It has already been told earlier today, but for a research infrastructure, we have to deal with political perspective, financial, scientific for sure, operational also. So it can be complicated for scientific to understand all those different levels, or for administrative people to understand both the scientific or the operational level. So it implies for a small team, because at the end we are a small team in the daily activity of the infrastructure, to understand a very complex environment and to understand also the constraint of the others. So here again, this is for OPRAS at least a major challenge that we have to face. And for instance, we have a difficulty to find the balance between sharing knowledge, sharing information, and not spamming people. And this is something very complicated, because sometimes you think that you have to inform the executive board or the OPRAS coordination team about something, and then you notice that it was more confusing than helpful for the colleague. So it's really complicated for a young infrastructure. I don't know for other oldest one, but it's really complicated to know what kind of information you have to share, how you can share it, and to whom in your network or in your team. So more specifically for the OPRAS coordination team, so which ensure the daily activity of the infrastructure, I've written three main specific challenge. The first one is that, because yes, since the beginning of the conference, we discussed that we need people who are skilled in specific domain. I'm not sure about this actually, because at the end, the operational team is only between 5 or 10 people. And if you have too much specialization for each of your colleague, at the end, they won't be able to replace someone if he or she is on holidays, she is not available, or something like that. So for a research infrastructure, it's really important also to be able to do the work of the others, if needed. So to be, of course, specialized in something, but also to be able to understand and to take the job which has to be done by someone else. So here we for us, it's a kind of difficulty to find people who are specialized in something, and also to are able to do everything if needed, because at the end, when you have to organize a conference, it's not only you leave your administrative work if you are an administrative officer, but you also have to manage many different things regarding the organization of the event, or so many things. So I think it's not only ability of being specialized, but also ability to do everything, or a lot of things. The second point for us is, of course, the sustainability of the team, because for OPRAS, for instance, most of the people who are part of the coordination team are paid by European projects. So at the end of the project, what can we do with our colleagues? Because of course we want to keep them with us, but it's not always easy. So we have to find solutions to sustain the team, both because we find our colleagues are good, but also because they have the memory of operas, the memory of the building of the infrastructure, and this is something very valuable and something we need then for the development of the infrastructure. And the third point, I've already told about that, it's the knowledge management. So what kind of tool we can use, we have to use in a distributed team, how we can ensure a proper knowledge management, so sharing information within the team and with the different bodies of operas. So this is something we very regularly discuss in the team, because it's not so easy to decide and to decide. And for doing so, what we started within operas is to have 2 annual seminars only for the coordination team, 1 annual seminar for the executive board of operas, between 2 or 3 days, just to be sure that we are at the same level of information, that we are sure that each of us feel comfortable in his situation, so it's both regarding the team building and the development of the infrastructure. And then I've been asked also to explain how do we find good people for the infrastructure and what are our needs regarding the training. So of course for operas, at least the first thing is learning by doing. I think it's the case of most of us, so I won't develop this point. It's also how we can rely on our experience and network, and also the relation we can develop with other existing infrastructure. For instance, operas has developed strong relationship with Daria, Eric, and also with other Eric in social science and humanities. And it's very, very helpful for operas to rely on their experience and to know what we should do or what they did as a mistake and what we shouldn't do. So it's really, I think it's something really interesting to also develop at the very beginning collaboration with the existing Eric. And the last point, of course, is that within operas, we decided to attend the Emery Master as a team. And so each module, it's someone different who attend the module. And it's really interesting because it's a way for us to have access to all the whole master information and documentation. And we dedicate a specific day during our annual seminar. We did that in late last August. A specific day to discuss the content of each of our module and share information and see how we can apply what we learn more theoretically within the Master Emery to how we can apply it to Opera's research infrastructure. So this is something very valuable and very, I think it's also part of the team building activities in Operas. In terms of hiring, so what we decide within Operas is not really to find people who are skilled in a specific thing, but I think it's because we are a young infrastructure, it's my view. But mainly we prefer people who are very motivated, engaged, who are willing to learn and willing to give their life for the infrastructure, because at the very beginning it's something like that. So for us it's more important to prefer this kind of people than very skilled and experienced people in a specific domain. So yeah, I think that's all. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. So you raised many important points. I think, I'm afraid in the interest of time, we don't have so much time for questions. But maybe 1 or 2 questions are, of course, possible. Are there anything burning? Yeah, there's one question over there.
Thank you, Suzanne. I have a comment rather than a question. I agree with many things that you said, but with many of them I do not agree. But you said in the last sentence, why? Because maybe you are young infrastructure and many services or many activities that we are supposed to perform, you've been given, probably provided in kind by the institution that you hosted. So I think that when you say that we don't need the people with specific expertise, I do not agree. I think in most established infrastructure, this is exactly the opposite. We have rather, I would say even more, we have the team of one-man shows. The person is not there, no one can do the job. This is not the case probably for the project managers who work on the services itself, but for the fixed staff of the infrastructure, this is exactly the problem that we have. We have one person for finance, we have one person for communication, one for legal. So, and we need this expertise. We cannot have someone who has just a knowledge, a little bit of everything, because it's not the case when you're an independent and a legal entity and you need to cope with all these issues. And this is causes what we said before, also for the time that we can sacrifice or have pleasure to spend on training. This is not the problem of the budget, I think, in most cases of the established infrastructure, because in our case, for example, maybe I shouldn't say it on streaming, we do have a training budget every single year, and we never spend it really as we should, because people, they do not have time. It's it's much easier to convince people that the hard skills they need to be trained on, because they need it really for the day work. But when we talk about mostly the lack is rather the soft skills, if in the management and coordination of the infrastructure, this is more difficult to find the time to see for something that will be definitely helpful. But okay, if I don't have time because I need to choose, because I will do this soft skill training which will help me in my work, or I will not meet the deadline because I have so many things to do. And the day has still 24 hours. So I think this is the problem. Not more the budget, but the time and how to organize it within the team to be more performant.
Yes, thank you for your comment. No, of course it was a bit provocative, because within the OPRAS coordination team we have a communication officer, we have a technical coordinator, so we have people with specialization. But what I think it's really important also to highlight that it's not, when you have a very young infrastructure, you need also people who are able to do something more. So I think of course it was a bit provocative, because we are more organized than what I've presented. But it's also important to say that for us, at least, our challenge is really how to build the team and to ensure the proper circulation of knowledge and of information. And for that also implies to have people who are able to understand the others and other constraints and things like that. So this is something more, yeah.
Understand, but not replace.
Yeah, no, it's not replacing, but at the end, when you are in the preparatory phase, you don't have money yet. So you also need to have a small team which is able to do everything and to discover the work which has to be done. So, but I agree with you. I think the more you develop your infrastructure, the more you need specialized and skilled people for it. Yeah.
I hate to stop you here with
sorry.
this very interesting discussion. We have time for one more question, I think, but please, quick answer also to a quick question.
I just wanted to comment in that I totally agree with what you say there about a young infrastructure learning from what the people that have been operational for many years have done. But my infrastructure, Instract, was there in the first roadmap, and we've been operational for many years. And in a way, it's more important for us to see what the new ones are doing, because we made up processes because there were no processes. Then we made them up to the best of our ability with a very small team, 2-3 people doing everything. Then it's good for us to look what the new ones are doing and question ourselves. These processes we've been doing for 10 years, were the right processes. We shouldn't be attached to keep doing things just because we've been doing it for many years. The new infrastructure can have a fresh view, and that's why staff exchanges are useful both ways, from the old infrastructure to the new ones, but because we all shouldn't be attached to our processes, even if we made them, and look if it's a better way of doing things.
Okay, thank you very much also for that comment. I think we have to move on. Now, third speaker in this session is Yannick Lecret from EGI.
So, thank you very much. So, I represent one of the old, as far as I understood. I fully subscribe to what Niklas said, and as you will see, EGI is almost identical to Elixir in its composition and in its distribution. The only point is that we are not a research infrastructure per se, we are an e-infrastructure, which objective is to serve the research infrastructure, but also the scientific communities. We don't serve only the research infrastructure, we serve the research communities. So far, we serve about 220 different scientific areas. And just as you can see, EGI, in fact, is a federation of over 200 computing and data centers spread across 47 countries. So the footprint is much larger than Europe because the scientific collaborations are. So what we serve is that you see that we have collaboration with at least 31 large-scale research infrastructure, and we have 12 integrated e-infrastructure worldwide because we don't work in isolation, and we have agreement also with the peer infrastructure in the other world region. So in terms of federation, we provide different kind of services and computing. So we gather about 1 million core and 740 40 petabyte of disk and tape storage. And we last year we served 5 billion CPU times hour to the different scientists that are using the infrastructure. In fact, EGI is a federation, and after more than a decade of national and EC funding, the stakeholders have decided to create a legal entity, the EGI Foundation, to coordinate the activity at the European level. So at that time, the ERIC has just been adopted by the Council and the Parliament, and it wasn't too early for us to move toward an ERIC's legal structure, so we decided to create a Dutch foundation. Currently, the EGI Foundation, so the headquarters of the EGI Federation, has 25 employees representing 16 nationalities and working from 7 different countries. So you see that we are very widespread, and the relationship between us have to be very carefully managed. I just decided not to repeat Niklas' talk, to take a different angle, I decided to go on the IT service management field, and because it's not obvious to have IT service management in research. And if you remember, in FP7, one of the main focus of FP7 was about publication. We need to publish science. But since Horizon 2020, the focus has shifted towards services. So now we have to deliver services. And there is also a strong focus on sustainability of the research infrastructure and the services and the collaboration. And this is a major cultural shift that has shaken us quite a lot. What we can see also is that there is a huge increased customer expectation because digital services nowadays are a commodity. Everyone is selling services, talking about the big American GAFA or other organization. And you can also have the anything as a service, which is quite a commonplace now. So that has huge consequences on each and every of our distributed infrastructure. And the point, as it has been mentioned in one of the previous sessions, is that there is a very limited to no formal training in how to professionally plan, deliver, and control IT services or manage research infrastructure. And there is definitely a skill, experience, and knowledge gap. So that leads to some challenges that I think we are all facing, and it is to move away from being perceived as a project from the creation or the inception start, and to appear as a sustainable service provider, just to gain the trust of the customer, the trust of the stakeholder, of the funding agency. How do we do that? So we have tried to develop a very, you will see it's a very simple methodology, and I should stop working on the cable because, and so we have decided to define a structured approach that has led us to some certification and to spread the knowledge first in our employees and our closest team, just to establish them as champion, to disseminate it throughout the whole infrastructure. And this is the training. So in terms of IT service management, what we decided to do is to turn toward FITSM. So FITSM is a lightweight standard family derived from ISO 20000, and it's much more easier to adopt and to comply with than ISO 20000. And so this is suitable for IT service providers of any type and scale. So, and it can be incremental. You don't need to implement everything at once. You can start with a few processes and just increase when you mature. Sorry. And the main design principle is keep it simple. So everything in FITSM is freely released under Creative Commons license, so which is good, so that you are not bound by anything. And it is operated and maintained by ITMO, which is a German non-profit organization. And the certification are provided by two professional certification authority. So one is ICO Cert in Germany, and the other one is APMG International that you may have heard about. So the nice things to say that FITSM is the outcome of an EC-funded project that was called FITSM, and I think it is a very successful outcome. So what we did is that we started to implement FITSM first for 6 of our processes, the one that were the more critical for us in terms of operation. And then after that, we decided to implement all the FITSM processes throughout our organization. And once we have implemented that, and we started to revise our service portfolio and to act more professionally and be able to repeat more constantly and consistently what we were doing, we have been told that we have already implemented 80% of the ISO 20000 standard. And also the auditor whom I was talking with told me that ISO 20000 is just a specification of ISO 9000, which is the quality management standard. And he told me that, okay, if you go for a certification on both of them at the same time, you will probably get a saving of 30%. And so he knew how to talk to my heart. As a manager, saving 30% on some expenses is never refused. So what we did is that we decided to run the last mile and to go for ISO certification. So now we have a double ISO certification. And every year we have the pleasure to have a validation audit by some external auditor from TÜV Süd. And this year we have even much more fun because this is the recertification. So the good point of the certification behind the apparent burden is that it forces you to reflect on what you are doing, how you are doing it, and why you are doing it. And for that, that requires to sit a bit and to think what exactly shall we continue to do what we are doing and the way we are doing it. And so what we have done also is that to reach that point, we decided to train everyone in the foundation. So everyone from the administrative assistant to the director got at least the foundation level in IT service management, just to ensure that we are all speaking the same language and that we understand the acronym that we are using. Because everyone is somehow in contact with everything, and that is very important. And then we decided to go toward the more advanced level and expert level. So once we saw the value internally, others started to recognize those benefits as well and wanted to do it. And as Niklas said, for example, Elixir is one of our largest customers using the FITSM courses. And so, because by having recognized the value of that and this need, after training our people, we decided to add the service to our service catalog. And so now we are offering training to help the other and to help our members also to move toward a more professional service delivery. So, yeah, just So just as a brief conclusion, the structure approach has led us to the certification, to the ISO certification, and to completely rethink the way we were working. And the intensive and systematic training of our people allowed us to handle the challenge and to be recognized today as a sustainable and professional service provider. And we still have to evolve and to improve, but this is what we do through a continual service improvement. And so the EGI Foundation today work as a support structure to our internal members to train them, but also to the other research infrastructure and to everybody else who might be interested in. But mostly we focus on our members and the research infrastructure and the scientific communities. And last but not least, we are adding a new service to our service catalog. This is a maturity assessment and internal audit to help people assess where they stand. And after that, we can prepare them for internal audit or annual revision. So, and we also work in ISO 27, so for information security. And we really work toward improving the service delivery of all the members in the research infrastructure area. And I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yannick. Questions to Yannick? Yeah, there's one question over there.
Sanna Sorvari-Sundet. I don't know anything about this, so thank you for the introduction to this new standard. So if you consider the standard and the work around it, was it mainly technical or staff related? So it's a kind of a more training the people to manage. So what section was taking most of the time?
The difficulty is that, as it has been gently reminded, we were an old organization, so we were building on more than a decade of empirical construction. So we had to clean up 10 to 15 years of accumulation, and that was pretty tough. That was both for the document, for the procedure, for the way of working, but also for the mindset of people working. And so this is really why we started with a small group of people that were really convinced of the benefit of adopting the standards. And they really worked as champion within the EGI Foundation to convince their colleagues and show them the benefit of adopting a more standardized way, more standardized approach. We also hired a consultant who was the coordinator of the project who developed the standards to help us going through that challenge. But still, it has been kind of a very intensive work, and it took us about 15 to 18 months to go through the ISO certification. So it's not only the FITSM definition, it's the ISO certification. And what you have to take into account is that going toward a certification doesn't mean reinventing the wheel or changing all what you are doing. It's mostly documenting what you are doing and how you are doing it. Just to be sure that, for example, if someone leaves, then someone else can take over because everything is described and documented. That's mainly the point. And as a manager, when I joined the EGI Foundation, one of my issues that I may knew who was doing one thing, but if that person was not there, I did not know whom to turn to. And also I discovered that sometimes we were writing 3 times the same document because they were lost in our document server with 200,000 documents, and we were unable to find them with the keywords or the search tool. So, yeah.
Are there any other questions to Yannick? Because I also just wondered, especially for new people who are coming into your organization, who are maybe not really used to this kind of very structured form of training, how they normally react? Are they all embracing it, or are they more skeptical?
You mean the new people, the new employee who join the organization? Usually they're a bit scared. Some of them are really impressed by the level of organization for such a small organization, because we just have 25 people. But most of them jump into it, and we have a good training program. So it's a bit tough at the beginning, but also what I noticed is that it reduced the time to adaptation and the time to speed up for these people, because they are made aware much quickly about what we are doing and how and why we are doing it. So that helped them also to get into the organization much faster.
Thank you. There's one more question.
Well, actually, this your presentation opened a lot of questions to me, but I have Sergio here, so I will ask him later. Yes. Now the question is, we are also an old organization. Okay? So when you are implementing this new thinking, all this inertia, how is it managed by the staff, in particular with these single failure points, these people who are doing this very specific thing that if they are not there, you don't know who else is going to do them. I mean, are they engaging into the change of culture, or has anybody in the team just left because they didn't want to see this change?
In fact, there is no more single point of failure because as we have defined all the processes, all the procedures that we have, the services that we deliver which are described, we know also who are the service owner and who are the backup of the service owner. So we have shadow appointed for everything. So at that point, when someone is not there, then we know whom to turn to.
But the process to get there, but this is the situation now, but you have evolved. Is this evolution soft, or has there been? Is it soft, a soft evolution, or you have really had problems with the inertia of people who have been doing things one other way for so long?
I'm looking at my colleague to see how he perceived it, because
it's a tough question.
I think that it has been quite soft. Of course, for some people, our softness had to be a bit stronger than for the others. But yeah, everyone just has been involved But we did also some awareness-raising campaign within the employees, explaining them what we will do, how we will do it, and that the goal is not to replace them. The goal is not to lower the salary because we will discover that what they are doing is so simple. But the point is that the goal was really to document what they were doing, so when people are not there, we can still continue to do the job. And that's the main point, that we have to ensure continuity, repeatability, and to become sustainable. So,
very encouraging. Thank you.
I think we have to move on now to the last speaker of this session, Anna Casino, again from a more younger organization, from Disco, and we heard her before, so.
Okay, yeah, but I wear another hat now as an employer, and from the perspective of which can be the challenges that a young research infrastructure may need to tackle when operating the coordination and the preparation of the research infrastructure. DISCO, Distributed System of Scientific Collections, and this is all what it is about. A specimen, physical objects that are contained in the natural science collections, in the natural history museums, in botanic art and botanic gardens, that we want to provide access to by making virtual collections across Europe. So certainly, when we talk about the research infrastructure, again, this is my problem, I guess, but okay, we'll continue here. The vision of DISCO is providing a natural science collection support for discovery and modeling all of life on Earth. It's a big vision, and there are a lot of numbers behind that understanding. We are, as I said before, we are 119 institutions committed to deliver the information contained in those collections to the benefit of science and society at large. We are spread all over 21 countries, and I think that the numbers are impressive. We hold in our collections 1.5 billion specimen physical objects that are describing up to 80% of the diversity described worldwide. So we do have more than 5,000 scientists working collaboratively and jointly to build this research infrastructure. But certainly, building this is being a challenge. We are very young. We just came into the S3 roadmap update 2018, so we are now facing the preparatory phase that, thanks to the funding of the Commission, will be a project, DISCO Prepare, that will enter into force on the 1st of February. So we are really in the process of becoming a consolidated research infrastructure, even though our content itself has been there for centuries. The natural science collections have been managed all over Europe and all over the world for centuries. And the community that supports the natural science collections in Europe has been working together for more than 20 years under the CTAF community. So, but still, managing all these numbers is a huge challenge. And it's because certain reasons that I wanted to also encapsulate. I told you I am an economist and want to have everything well structured, so I go through the identification of certain groups of reasons. DISCO is rooted on scientific teams, and most of them, and we were discussing previously on that, most of them, they may have limited competences in terms of management. So we have to go and look forward to having multidisciplinary training of the staff that is intended and devoted to manage the collections, both at the nodes and also at the hub. Secondly, DISCO operates in a very, very crowded and complex landscape at a global scale. So we may need coordination and alignment on equal basis, coordinated with a lot of other environmental research infrastructures that are already at a very much higher level of maturity, that we need to coordinate with them to identify the gaps that all together may have, but also identify the duplications or the overlaps that we may have. But also, we need to tackle the alignment with other similar initiatives worldwide. There are a lot of other networks and initiatives outside in Europe, in Australia, in China, in the States, that are also working on having the digital access to the collections, the provision of the service that we are aiming to build with DISCO. So we really have to train our people in coordinating and getting aligned with other research infrastructures out there. DISCO has to tackle the increasing sophistication of the work. You have seen that we talk about the specimen, but we are not talking only about the physical objects. As I said, our aim is to provide the direct access to the information contained in those specimens. And I'm not talking only about taxonomic information. I'm talking about genomics, I'm talking about georeferencing information. So it's a lot of data and metadata that needs to be handled. And we are not only talking about taxonomic work, we are talking about artificial intelligence applied to handle, to better handle all this data. We are talking about big data. We are talking about new methodologies, new applications in extracting the right data from those physical objects. So this is a huge challenge for us. DISCO performance and service provision strongly relies on competences and skills that cannot find easily on the academic world. We are talking about bioinformatics that is combining biodiversity competences and also IT skills. So this is not taught at the schools. This is not included in any formal education path, and we need to really challenge this within DISCO, because we need to have the trained people, the trained skilled teams that are able to handle such a huge challenge. So this is basically what we need to address and to tackle. I was really naive when I did make this slide, because I didn't talk about funding or salaries or constraints in keeping the right people at the right place with the salaries and the conditions of work that we offer as a research infrastructure. But it's still, basically, those are the major challenges that we have to face. And for that, learning on management, in management, is a clear need for DISCO. DISCO has a specific challenge, as I mentioned, but also because we are distributed. We are across 21 countries with different policies, with different priorities, supported by different types of organizations. So we really have to tackle how to harmonize all those policies, how to share standards, how to monitor the joint impact of the research infrastructure beyond the performance of the individual institutions, beyond what each individual natural science museum is doing in Europe. So DISCO needs also to drive successfully, hopefully, to the required structural and organizational changes, because we are intended to delegate some of the current decisions taken by the institutions to be taken by the research infrastructure. And this means a lot for the institutions themselves and a lot for the teams that need to be also embedded into that shift. DISCO is at the very early stage of development, so we really need to learn from others, from the successful methods that they have created and implemented, but also we want to learn about problems, constraints, or difficulties that others that are older, or better to say, more established, research infrastructures. And we need also to find our own niche, because as I said, the landscape is getting crowded, and we need to also identify how we better deliver our services in that complex landscape. And finally, DISCO looks for equipping our leaders, our managers, with excellent skills and competences. So as you see, for us, learning is at the core of the process of building the research infrastructure. We cannot live and we cannot progress without learning and training ourselves. So as a conclusion, I would like to say that learning is pivotal for DISCO, and for the advance and the progress of the CTAF community, that is the scientific community that drives the construction of the research infrastructure. And this is because two things, because we need furnish our people with managerial skills, with multidisciplinary skills, and also because we need to tackle successfully as much as we could the DISCO-specific challenges. And this is all.
Okay, thanks, Anna. So for the reasons of time, we have time for just one question. Please, there's the microphone.
My question may be not to Anna, but to all, yes, panelists. We have old research infrastructures with managers, management leadership of old generation, yes. The examples, CERN, ESRF, I know better physical domains, yes, and the results and the achievements of these infrastructures demonstrate that management has been excellent. Yes, maybe there are problems, but really there are scientific results. Now we talk about the need of trainings and education programs for managers of research infrastructures. It's really a good approach, a new approach, and the question is, would it be possible that new managers of new generation, during their different activities, they take into account and they manage all aspects of research infrastructures except science, yes, and scientific problems? But this is my question. Thank you.
Who wants to answer?
Yeah, I do believe that it's healthy to have a scientific manager and an organization manager, because they are two different topics. And the interest and the trigger for their decision will be completely different. And if you are motivated by your H index, you cannot properly manage the organization. And the same way, if you are managing the organization, you don't have time to do good science. So I think that there should be some scientific council and some more managerial position. I think it can be healthy, because it might be difficult.
Perhaps we come back to the point of specialization. And for me, running an organization as a research infrastructure means to tackle different dimensions. And one is science, of course, but the others are governance, the other is financial matters. So there is a set of dimensions of the research infrastructure that needs to be tackled, as we said before, with specialized people, but also with an overarching and overall understanding of what it is, the research infrastructure. When in my presentation as a student, I was talking about branding, a coherent message. This is something that it has to run across the entire organization, and it has to be embedded into the performance of every single member of the organization. And the managers of that kind of organization, under my understanding, needs to have an overall understanding of everything. It is true that, as we said also before, success implies specialization and implies responses to different agents and actors in the research infrastructure. But together, you need to find a balance between the specialization that it is required to specifically target certain dimensions with the overall understanding of the managers that need to manage the organization as a whole.
So I'm on the same page. I think there are many dimensions in leading a research infrastructure, and I think the solution to this is to create some sort of leadership team. That's what we have done. That's what most other organizations do, where you bring together these different dimensions: external relations, science, communication, finance and management. And I think it's the only way. You need to allow people to be specialists. All of that require quite a lot of training and experience to run. But at the same time, you can't run an infrastructure without having science at the core. I mean, at the end, we are there to drive science. And so you need to have a scientific core that brings together that leadership team.
Yeah. I won't repeat what has already been said, but of course I totally agree. I think that, of course, science is at the core, and maybe the main difficulties, for sure, at least for us, for OPRAS, is how to be sure that people who are not used in this specific field of social science and humanities, but who are part of the team, can understand the specificity of this science and this field or this community. So I think this is exactly what we said before, that each of us should have a specialization, but also understand the very complexity of the field in which we are involved.
Okay, I think, again, in the interest of time, we have to stop this interesting discussion and go to the next part.
Okay, so our next session is dedicated to networking. As you've heard, research infrastructures are very special, and peer-to-peer learning is a really important component of research infrastructure. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to try and meet as many of your colleagues here and form connections. So we will have 3 parallel networking activities. If you look at the back of your badge, you will all have a set of 3 numbers. Okay, so we've got 3 activities, and those numbers tell you the order that you're going to do the activities in. The numbers correspond to the groups in the rooms. Group and room 3 is the throne room, where you had lunch and coffee. And then there are 2 other rooms directly off that room, the Marie-Therese room and the Leopold I room. And signs are outside the door. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to head upstairs, find your first room. We have 3 chairs for each of those sessions, and they will explain what you're going to do. We'll have a certain amount of time, and then you'll move to your next room. So hopefully we'll kind of mix people up quite a bit. We might need to cut short kind of the time that we had hoped to spend on this, but we are going to start the final keynote from Jan Husak's a little bit later, but I'll come round and tell you all about the timing and then get you all to come back here. So I can ask you to head upstairs. Thank you.